Everyone in Seattle knows Crazy Mike, the filthy homeless man they cross the street to avoid. What they don't know is that he's worth $2.8 billion, and he chose the streets to expose a truth that will destroy you. If you've ever walked through downtown Seattle, you've probably seen him. Crazy Mike, the wild-haired homeless man who screams at strangers, digs through garbage bins, and smells so bad that people cross the street to avoid him. He's been a fixture on Pike Street for 12 years, sleeping in doorways, ranting at passersby, and generally making everyone uncomfortable. Business owners complain about him constantly. He's scaring away customers, they tell police. He's aggressive, unpredictable, dangerous. The Seattle Police Department has arrested him 247 times, for everything from disturbing the peace to trespassing. Social workers have tried to help him dozens of times, but Mike refuses all assistance, screaming that he doesn't want their dirty money. Most people assume Mike is severely mentally ill. His behavior seems erratic and threatening. He talks to himself constantly, muttering about corporate criminals and blood money and children paying the price. His speech is often incoherent, jumping between topics, mixing English with what sounds like gibberish. Office workers stepping over him on their way to Starbucks shake their heads in pity or disgust. Another casualty of the system, they think. Probably drugs, maybe schizophrenia. Sad, but what can you do? Mike's appearance is truly disturbing. His hair is matted and gray, his beard tangled with food scraps and dirt. His clothes are layers of rags held together with duct tape and safety pins. His smell is overwhelming, a mixture of unwashed human, rotting food, and something else that people can't quite identify but makes them gag. He carries everything he owns in a shopping cart he's somehow stolen and modified with additional wire baskets. The cart is filled with seemingly random junk, empty bottles, old newspapers, broken electronics, and notebooks covered in illegible scrawl. What makes Mike particularly frightening is his unpredictability. One moment he'll be quietly digging through trash, the next he'll suddenly start screaming at a businessman walking by, "Your company kills children. I know what you did. The blood is on your hands." Most people assume he's having psychotic episodes. They hurry past, avoiding eye contact, maybe dropping $1 in his direction to ease their conscience. Nobody stops to listen to what he's actually saying. Nobody realizes that his crazy rants aren't random at all. The Pike Street Business Association has been trying to get Mike removed for years. Sarah Chen, who owns a high-end boutique, has led the charge. "He's destroying our neighborhood," she argues at city council meetings. "Tourists are afraid to walk down our street. Property value..."
The complaints are always the same. Mike is aggressive. He harasses customers. He defecates in public. He's clearly mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. Business owners have documentation. Photos of Mike screaming at their customers. Videos of him rifling through their dumpsters. Recordings of his incoherent rants. Detective Lisa Rodriguez has been dealing with Mike longer than anyone. She's the one who usually responds when businesses call about him, and she's arrested him more times than she can count. Mike's not violent, she explains to concerned citizens. He's loud, he's disturbing, but he's never actually hurt anyone. The law says we can arrest him for trespassing or disturbing the peace, but we can't force him into treatment if he doesn't want it. What frustrates Detective Rodriguez most is Mike's intelligence. When you talk to him one-on-one, away from the crowds, he's articulate, she admits. He knows the law better than most lawyers. He knows exactly what his rights are, exactly how far he can push, before we can legally arrest him. It's like he's playing some kind of game. The city has tried everything: social workers, mental health professionals, homeless outreach coordinators. They've all attempted to help Mike. He refuses services, refuses shelter, refuses medical care. When pressed, he becomes agitated and starts his rants about corporate corruption and blood money. He claims he doesn't want help because all money is tainted, explains Dr. Amanda Foster, a social worker who's tried to work with Mike for 3 years. He says accepting government assistance or charity would make him complicit in the system. It sounds like paranoid delusions, but he's surprisingly consistent in his beliefs. What nobody realizes is that Mike's seemingly random collection of junk serves a very specific purpose. Those notebooks filled with illegible scrawl, they're not the ravings of a madman. They're meticulously detailed financial records, corporate research, and investigative notes written in a code Mike developed himself. Every day, Mike positions himself strategically around the financial district, listening to conversations, observing meetings, documenting what he sees and hears. The broken electronics in his cart aren't junk. They're recording devices he's modified to capture conversations from surprising distances. Mike's daily routine is actually highly organized, though it appears chaotic to observers. He starts each morning at 5 a.m., going through garbage bins behind corporate offices, looking for discarded documents. He photographs everything with a hidden camera, then returns the papers so nobody knows they've been copied. From 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., he positions himself near the entrance to Harrison Industries headquarters, a gleaming 47-story tower that dominates the Seattle skyline. He watches executives come and go, noting who meets with whom, documenting license plates and faces. The notebooks contain detailed organizational charts of dozens of major corporations, financial data going back years, and what appears to be evidence of systematic corporate fraud. But the handwriting is deliberately messy, the code deliberately confusing. To anyone who might glance at the pages, it looks like the disorganized thoughts of someone with severe mental illness. Mike has been building a case, a massive, comprehensive investigation into corporate corruption that would make FBI investigators envious. He's documented money laundering, tax evasion, environmental crimes, and something much worse: the deliberate exploitation of child labor in overseas factories. What makes Mike's investigation extraordinary is its scope and accuracy. Using nothing but public records, discarded documents, and overheard conversations, he's mapped out criminal networks that span multiple countries and involve billions of dollars. But Mike isn't building this case to expose corporate crime. He's building it to prove a point that will cost him everything and change nothing. Except, perhaps, the conscience of anyone who learns his real story. The truth about Mike isn't just that he's not crazy. The truth is that he's the heir to one of the fortunes he's investigating, and his decision to live on the streets is the most devastating act of moral courage most people will ever encounter. Michael Harrison III was born into unimaginable wealth. His father, Michael Harrison Jr., built Harrison Industries from a small electronics company into a global tech empire worth $2.8 billion. The Harrison name appears on hospital wings, university buildings, and charitable foundations throughout the Pacific Northwest. Michael III, was raised in a 47,000-square-foot mansion overlooking Lake Washington, educated at the finest private schools, and groomed from birth to inherit and expand the family business. He graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School and joined Harrison Industries as Vice President of Global Operations at age 27. For 5 years, Michael performed exactly as expected. He was brilliant, ruthless, and profitable. Under his leadership, Harrison Industries' overseas manufacturing operations expanded dramatically, reducing production costs by 73% and increasing profit margins to unprecedented levels. Michael lived the life his father had planned for him: a penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle, a collection of luxury cars, membership in exclusive clubs, and a social calendar filled with charity galas where the Harrison family was always prominently featured and generously praised.
But Michael had always been uncomfortable with certain aspects of the family business. Questions about working conditions and overseas factories were deflected with corporate language about local standards and cultural differences. When Michael asked to visit the manufacturing facilities, he was told it wasn't necessary, that local managers handled all operational details. Michael's growing unease was dismissed by his father as naive idealism that would fade with maturity. "Business is business," Michael Sr. would say. "We provide jobs, we follow local laws, we deliver profits. Everything else is sentiment." In 2011, against his father's explicit orders, Michael flew unannounced to Bangladesh to visit Harrison Industries' largest manufacturing facility. What he found there would destroy his world and set him on a path that would ultimately lead to Pike Street. The factory employed 3,200 workers in conditions that violated every safety standard Michael had ever learned about. Workers, many of them visibly under 18, worked 16-hour shifts in temperatures exceeding 100 degrees. Safety equipment was non-existent. Fire exits were locked. Medical care was unavailable. Michael discovered that Harrison Industries was paying local contractors 23 cents per hour per worker. Wages so low that entire families, including children as young as 12, had to work just to afford basic food. The products they manufactured were sold in American stores for 2,000% markup over production costs. What devastated Michael most was learning that his own father not only knew about these conditions, but had specifically chosen this contractor because their willingness to use child labor kept costs impossibly low. Internal documents Michael found in the factory office showed years of correspondence between Harrison Industries executives and local managers discussing ways to avoid international labor inspectors. Michael spent 3 days secretly documenting everything, photographing working conditions, interviewing workers through translators who risked their jobs to help him, and copying financial records that proved Harrison Industries was deliberately exploiting child labor to maximize profits. He met Rashida, a 14-year-old girl who worked 18-hour shifts sewing electronics components, earning less than $4 per day to support her sick mother and 3 younger siblings. Rashida showed Michael burns on her hands from handling chemical adhesives without protection, explaining that workers who complained about safety were immediately fired. When Michael returned to Seattle, he demanded an immediate meeting with his father and the board of directors. He presented his evidence and insisted that Harrison Industries immediately withdraw from all contracts involving child labor, regardless of the financial. His father's response was swift and brutal. "You've always been too soft for this business. Those people were grateful for the work. We're providing opportunities they wouldn't have otherwise. If you can't understand that, maybe you're not ready to inherit this company." The board supported Michael Sr., arguing that changing their manufacturing practices would cost millions and put them at a competitive disadvantage against companies that continued using cheap overseas labor. Michael was given an ultimatum: accept the business practices that had built the family fortune, or forfeit his inheritance and his position in the company. His father made it clear that there was no middle ground. Michael could either be complicit in the exploitation, or he could walk away from everything. "You have 48 hours to decide," Michael Sr. told his son. "Either you're a Harrison or you're not. But you can't be a Harrison and a humanitarian. The world doesn't work that way." For 2 days, Michael wrestled with the most difficult decision of his life. He could accept his inheritance work within the system to gradually improve conditions, and enjoy the wealth and power that came with being a Harrison. Or he could reject everything and try to expose the truth, knowing that his family would destroy him and that other companies would continue the same practices. Michael consulted lawyers who told him that, while Harrison Industries' practices were ethically questionable, they weren't technically illegal under local laws. He spoke with human rights organizations who explained that even if he exposed his family's company, dozens of other corporations were doing exactly the same thing. The decision that changed Michael's life came when he received a package at his apartment. Photographs of Rashida and her family, along with a note in broken English, thanking him for caring about their situation. The photos showed Rashida's younger brothers and sisters, all thin and obviously malnourished, but smiling at the camera. Michael realized that he couldn't enjoy wealth built on their suffering, even if exposing the truth wouldn't save them. He couldn't live in luxury, knowing that every dollar he spent was paid for with the childhood of kids like Rashida. On March 15, 2012, Michael Harrison III walked into his father's office and formally renounced his inheritance. He resigned from Harrison Industries, liquidated his personal assets, and donated every penny to organizations fighting child labor. But Michael's plan went far beyond simply walking away from his family's money. He was going to prove a point about moral courage that would cost him everything and change absolutely nothing, except possibly the conscience of anyone who witnessed his sacrifice. Michael's father's final words to him were, "You'll be back. When you're living in poverty, when you realize what you've given up, you'll come crawling back. And maybe then you'll understand that idealism is a luxury only rich people can afford." Michael's response would prove his father wrong in the most devastating way possible. "You're right that idealism is a luxury, but I'm going to prove that some luxuries are worth giving up everything to keep." Michael's transformation from billionaire heir to homeless street person was deliberate and methodical. He wasn't driven to the streets by addiction or mental illness. He chose them as his platform for the most extreme act of protest anyone had ever witnessed. Michael's plan was brilliant and heartbreaking. He would live as society's most despised and ignored population to document how easily people dismiss inconvenient truths when they come from someone they consider worthless. Every day on Pike Street was an experiment in moral courage and social blindness. Michael deliberately crafted his crazy Mike persona to be as off-putting as possible. The smell, the appearance, the erratic behavior, all of it was designed to ensure that people would avoid him, dismiss him, and never listen to what he was actually saying. But underneath the performance, Michael was conducting the most comprehensive investigation into corporate corruption that any individual had ever attempted. Using skills learned at Harvard Business School and access to financial information he'd memorized during his years at Harrison Industries, Michael was building an unshakable case against his father's company and dozens of others. The notebooks, filled with seemingly incoherent scrawl, were actually detailed financial analyses, written in a code Michael had developed. Every crazy rant about corporate criminals contained specific, accurate information about illegal business practices. Every time he screamed at a businessman about blood money, he was confronting someone whose company he'd researched and whose crimes he'd documented. Michael was proving that society would ignore even the most obvious truth if it came from someone they considered beneath their notice. His homelessness was his credibility test for humanity, and humanity was failing spectacularly. What makes Michael's story even more extraordinary is what he did with every dollar he collected during his 12 years on the streets. Every coin dropped by a guilty passerby, every bill handed over by someone trying to ease their conscience, Michael saved it all. But he wasn't saving money for himself. Michael was building a fund to help the very people his family's business had exploited. Every dollar went toward a secret charity he'd established before becoming homeless. The Rashida Foundation, named after the 14-year-old girl whose suffering had inspired his transformation. Over 12 years, Michael collected approximately $47,000 from panhandling. But his real fundraising came from his investigative work. Every corporate crime he documented, he reported to federal investigators, often leading to massive fines and settlements. Michael would then contact the victims of these crimes and anonymously direct settlement money toward their compensation. Michael had helped recover over $340 million in stolen wages, environmental damages, and fraud settlements. Every penny went to victims of corporate exploitation, often the same children and families who suffered while companies like Harrison Industries maximized profits. The most heartbreaking part of Michael's secret mission was that he'd been tracking Rashida and her family for 12 years. The girl who had inspired his sacrifice was now 26, married, and working as a teacher in a school that Michael's investigations had helped fund. Rashida never knew that the American businessman, who had briefly visited her factory, had given up a fortune to improve her life. Michael's investigations had led to the closure of 7 factories using child labor, the prosecution of 23 corporate executives, and new international labor standards that protected thousands of children. All of this was accomplished by a man society considered a worthless, crazy, homeless person. Michael's double life came to an end on a rainy Tuesday in November 2023. His father, Michael Harrison Jr., died of a heart attack at age 78, leaving his entire fortune to his only son, the son he disowned 11 years earlier. The legal system didn't recognize Michael Sr.'s disownment of his son. Despite everything that had happened, Michael III was still the legal heir to Harrison Industries and the $2.8 billion family fortune. When lawyers finally tracked down Michael III to inform him of his inheritance, they found Crazy Mike sleeping in a doorway on Pike Street. The scene was surreal. Corporate attorneys in $1,000 suits explaining inheritance law to a man they assumed was a mentally ill vagrant. Michael listened quietly as they explained that he was now one of the wealthiest people in America. Then he asked them to meet him the next day at Pike Place Market, where he had something important to tell them. On November 15, 2023, Michael Harrison III held an impromptu press conference in the middle of Pike Place Market. Without changing clothes or cleaning up his appearance, he identified himself to a gathering crowd of reporters, business owners, and the same passers-by who had been ignoring him for 12 years.
"I'd rather die honest on the streets," Michael announced, "than live as a billionaire built on children's suffering."
Or wouldn't listen because you thought I was crazy.
Now you know I gave up $2.8 billion to tell you this truth. Maybe now you'll listen. Michael burned every legal document that would have made him a billionaire, choosing to remain homeless rather than inherit wealth built on exploitation. His father had been wrong. Idealism wasn't a luxury that only rich people could afford. Sometimes
Idealism was so important that even rich people had to give up everything to preserve it. As the inheritance documents turned to ash, Michael Harrison III, Crazy Mike, proved that moral courage costs everything but is worth everything. And finally, for the first time in 12 years, people were listening. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make isn't what you choose to gain, but what you choose to give up. Michael Harrison III gave up a fortune to prove that truth is more valuable than wealth, that conscience is more important than comfort, and that some principles are worth losing everything to preserve. His story reminds us that we walk past heroes every day. We just don't recognize them because we're not ready to hear the truths they're trying to tell us. If this story changes how you see the homeless people in your city, share it. If it makes you question what real wealth means, talk about it. If it inspires you to listen to inconvenient truths, instead of dismissing them, act on it. Michael Harrison III spent 12 years trying to get our attention. The least we can do is pay attention to the people around us who might be trying to tell us truths we're not ready to hear. Reaction. So infinite solution successful is, I have brinking boxes. I have grammed, to afford of center and that brant, within to the other, indu, each years. We're all still human, still learning that courage sometimes looks like madness until you understand the whole story.